It's a cold morning when you wake up and say, "Hey," in a low voice. The usual morning ritual. "Hey," echoes from the walls of the cave. After a few seconds, you hear another, "Hey." It's your neighbors who've made it clear that they've also woken up and are ready for a new day. All of the items in your room are soft and rounded. They're all unbreakable. It's impossible to injure yourself by bumping into them. A stone tunnel several meters long separates you from the outside world. Over the years, you've learned to navigate it without problems. After all, you spent your childhood in this house. Earlier, you clicked your tongue so that the sound bouncing off the walls of the cave indicated the way out. But over the years, you've learned to listen to the wind. It will show you the way. Your typical morning would go something like this if everyone in the world were blind. The writer Stephen King wrote, "A child who is born blind is unaware of its blindness until someone tells him about it." If all of humanity didn't have sight, there simply wouldn't be such a problem. Think about how moles, earthworms, jellyfish, mollusks, some species of small rodents and snakes, as well as ticks, parasites, and inhabitants of the deepest oceans live. They all lack the ability to see. But in their habitat, this isn't necessary. For example, immersed in water deeper than 600 meters, all you can see is pitch darkness. You will notice about the same picture when living in another organism, if you're representative of tape parasites, or underground if you are a mole. Therefore, we can assume that people without eyesight could live in dense, dark forests or deep, safe caves. Our world would be radically different. There would be no cities as we're used to seeing them. There wouldn't be any tall buildings, no trains, and no planes. People most likely would spread evenly around the planet and would not be able to travel long distances. On the other hand, humankind would probably live in small communities as in prehistoric times. In the community, each person would perform a specific function to provide the others with their needs for survival. For example, someone would pick berries, someone would take care of housing, and someone would raise the children. Hunting, fishing, and animal husbandry probably would not exist, or these activities would be less common. It's hard to catch prey that you can't see, although perhaps a person would have come up with clever traps and we wouldn't have to become vegetarians. If you lived in such a community, you would notice that it's very quiet. People would talk almost in whispers. Silence allows you to better hear the world around you and makes finding your way around easier. Most likely, we would use sound cues. For example, bells with varying tones that are swayed by the wind could indicate a particular location in a community. You could easily find a communal dining room or bathroom after hearing a familiar sound. In addition to spatial orientation, we would better understand each other's mood by voice thanks to our fine hearing. Although it's not necessarily true that a blind person would be reunited with nature, it's likely that people would have formed their own hierarchy. For example, the rich would likely live in underground cities with developed infrastructure and technological progress that would simplify life without sight. And the poor would live on the surface to grow food and obtain the materials to build underground cities. Perhaps an analog of racism in terms of the tone of the voice could appear among the blind, and the colloquial speech of the rich and the poor might be very different. Although humans have many other senses, such as smell, touch, and hearing, 80% of our information about the environment comes from vision. The visual cortex takes up half of the entire cerebral cortex. Therefore, if people were blind from the moment they appeared on Earth, our brain would develop differently. What would we be like now if evolution created a substitute sensory mechanism for us? Most likely, instead of seeing, we would develop an acute sense of smell and echolocation like bats. It's generally accepted that bats are blind, but this is not the case. They see normally during the day, but at night their vision is not enough to navigate with. Therefore, they emit short ultrasonic signals that are inaudible to humans. Sound is reflected from surfaces and detected by the bats, after which they create a picture of the surrounding world in their brain. The echolocation of bats is so precise that they can detect a wire with a diameter of 0.4 of a millimeter at a distance of up to 4 meters. If people could do the same, we would not need eyes to find our way around. But blind people are not completely blind. Almost all blind people on Earth are able to distinguish light from darkness with the help of their eyes. Back in 1923, Harvard University graduate student CLYDE KEELER discovered that the pupils of people who can't see anything react to bright light. And only in the 1980s, scientists discovered a special type of ganglion cells on the retina called iPRGC. These cells are only 1% of the total number of visual receptors, but this is enough to detect bright light. Therefore, even if you were blind, you would still understand when it's daytime outside and when it's time to go to bed. Another thing is the inability to distinguish color. American Tommy Edison has been blind since birth. His YouTube channel is quite unique. On it, he describes what it's like to be blind. In one of the videos, he says that the very concept of color for him remains abstract and incomprehensible to this day. After all, if you've never seen a color, how can you even imagine it in your head? Color, one of the so-called qualia, is a philosophical phenomenon that cannot be described in words. Colors don't exist outside of our consciousness. After all, each color of paint is only the wavelength of light that our eyes perceive. Our brain is engaged in interpretation. Imagine that you meet a friend and you're both talking about the color blue. Since childhood, you know that blue looks like blue. But you cannot get into your friend's mind and find out how he sees blue. Your blue might look red to your friend, but he will still call it blue. You will talk for a while and then go separate ways without knowing that you were discussing completely different colors. Does this mean that we are locked inside our own mind? After all, vision only distorts the picture of the world around us. This is not entirely true. Although all people on the planet perceive colors in different ways, vision is the main tool for understanding the world. By doing a little experiment, you can verify this. Try to close your eyes and do a few usual things in your room. Most likely, you'll rely on tactile sensations and try to find the right objects. From habit, this can become difficult. Although blind people can perform daily tasks without involving their eyes, it took them a long time to adapt. If you want to learn to read a book, you'll need to learn Braille. If you want to move around the street without a guide and avoid obstacles on your own, you'll have to master the use of a mobility cane. If all of humanity were blind from birth, it's likely that evolution would develop alternative senses for us. For example, it would be nice to have infrared instead of normal vision. Some deep-sea squids have this. Since no sunlight reaches deeper depths, squid can actually see the heat of other ocean dwellers. Mosquitoes have the same vision. Flying up to the victim, they see accumulations of capillaries with warm blood under the thin skin. They choose the best spot and only then bite. If a person could develop thermal vision, perhaps the need for ordinary color vision would disappear. However, normal vision is important not only for functionality, but also to enjoy the beauty of the surrounding world. Think what art would be like if no one could see it. Most likely, we would create masterpieces from combinations of smells and reach an incredibly high level in music. But we would never have seen the masterpieces of great artists, sculptors, and architects. After all, there would not be such a society as it is now. There would be no states on the world map, and the map itself would not exist in its usual form. So appreciate your vision if you have it. Remember to visit your optometrist once in a while. And as always, thanks for watching.